Slave ships and slavery, a history of suffering, resistance, and legacy, the beginning of an inhuman system between the 15th and 19th centuries. The Atlantic Ocean became the stage for one of the greatest crimes in human history. Millions of Africans were captured, sold, and transported across the ocean in what became known as the transatlantic slave trade, a vast commercial system linking Europe, Africa, and the Americas in a brutal cycle of exploitation. This system formed what historians call the triangular trade. Ships left Europe carrying textiles, weapons, and manufactured goods. On the African coast, these goods were exchanged for captured men, women, and children. From Africa, ships sailed to the Americas with their holds packed with enslaved people. From the Americas, vessels returned to Europe loaded with sugar, cotton, coffee, and tobacco, products cultivated through enslaved labor. It is estimated that more than 12 million Africans were forcibly embarked. Around 10 million survived the crossing. Slave ships, floating prison slave ships, were designed for profit. The more human beings transported, the greater the financial return. The holds were low, dark, and barely ventilated. People were forced to lie side by side, shackled at the wrists and ankles. There was no room to stand, barely enough space to sit upright. One of the most infamous diagrams was that of the British ship Brooks, which depicted hundreds of bodies arranged like cargo. The image later became a powerful symbol for abolitionists exposing the cruelty of the trade. Food was minimal. Water was rationed. Disease spread rapidly. Mortality rates often exceeded 15% on certain voyages. The dead were thrown overboard. The Middle Passage, the journey between Africa and the Americas, became known as the Middle Passage. It could last weeks, sometimes months. The heat was suffocating, the stench unbearable, violence constant. Rebellions occurred aboard many ships. Some temporarily succeeded. Most were brutally suppressed. For countless individuals, the Atlantic Ocean became an unmarked grave. Arrival in the Americas. Upon arrival, survivors were taken to markets and auction blocks. Families were separated. Bodies were inspected like livestock. Slavery sustained entire economies. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean. Sugar, gold, and coffee in Brazil. Cotton and tobacco in the American South. Slavery became racialized, permanently linking skin color to a lifetime condition of bondage. One of the most powerful visual records of this brutality was the photograph The Scourged Back, portraying Gordon, whose scarred back exposed the violence of repeated whippings. Resistance in survival slavery was never passively accepted. There were rebellions aboard ships. Communities of escaped enslaved people formed throughout the Americas. Enslaved individuals sabotaged work, preserved African languages, religions, and traditions, and passed cultural knowledge across generations. Despite unimaginable oppression, culture survived and profoundly shaped the Americas through music, food, spirituality, and identity. Impact on Africa. The slave trade devastated African societies. Entire regions were depopulated. Internal conflicts were intensified. Political and economic systems were destabilized. The demographic and social consequences lasted for centuries. Abolition and its aftermath. Throughout the 19th century, abolitionist movements gained strength. The United Kingdom banned the slave trade in 1807. The United States banned the international slave trade in 1808. Brazil abolished slavery in 1888, becoming the last country in the Americas to do so. However, legal freedom did not immediately bring equality. Racial discrimination, segregation, and systemic inequality continued long after slavery formally ended. A legacy that endures. Slave ships carried more than human bodies. They carried cultures, languages, rhythms, beliefs, trauma, and resilience. The history of slave ships and slavery is not merely a distant chapter of the past. Its consequences still shape modern social, racial, and economic inequalities. To understand this history is to understand the present. To remember is to acknowledge. And acknowledgement is the first step toward justice.